Welcome to the Boundless Psyche Timeless Soul Summit, where we're exploring the importance of bringing a spiritual perspective to our individual and collective healing work. Our hope is that you will emerge from this gathering with a deeper understanding and reverence for some of our processes of inner knowing, all or most of which are ancient, and that you will feel more tapped into that sense of connectedness that is so essential for our well-being. I'm your host, Dr. Stacy Dicker, and today I am so excited to present Dr. José Luis Stevens. Hi, José.
Hello. Hi, Stacy.
José is the president and co-founder with wife Lena Stevens of the Power Path Seminars and School of Shamanism, an international school and consulting firm dedicated to the study and application of shamanism and indigenous wisdom to business and everyday life. José completed a 10-year apprenticeship with a Wixárika Huichol Maracame in the Sierras of central Mexico and has since gone on to study other Toltec traditions, as well as traditions from the Amazon, Andes, and Europe extensively. In 1983, he completed his doctoral dissertation at the California Institute of Integral Studies, focusing on the interface between shamanism and Western psychological counseling. Since then, he has studied cross-cultural shamanism around the world to distill the core elements of shamanic healing and practice. And as an international teacher and consultant, he has worked with a huge range of individuals and businesses to help them discover their most effective path of service and success. He has had the good fortune to work with individuals at the highest levels of government and professional life to support their understanding of their own potential and that of their associates. As an integral part of this work, José has helped to develop systems for understanding people that are unparalleled in the field of psychology and business. José is an MSW, life coach, and master teacher with over 45 years of experience. In addition, he is the author of numerous articles and more than 20 books, including How to Pray the Shaman's Way, Awaken the Inner Shaman, The Power Path, Secrets of Shamanism, Transforming Your Dragon, and Praying with Power. Today, our topic is Everything is Medicine. José, you have such an interesting background. How did you get started on this path of integrating Western psychology with shamanic practices around the world?
Well, that's really a long story, so I'm going to try to condense it. My first association with shamanism started really early in my life. I was spent a lot of time with my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, who is Mexican, and she was from Chihuahua, Mexico, and she was raised in a hacienda where there were many servants who were indigenous people who actually taught her their ways. And then she regaled me with those stories when I was very young, and just kind of watching her make cajeta, which is a candy, which I was very interested in at the time. But it all sank in. And then very gradually over the years of my education, I always had a great interest in, you could think of it as the supernatural or the metaphysical or all those things. And I ended up after my conventional education, I ended up at the California Institute of Integral Studies and had wonderful teachers there, people like Angela Sarian and Michael Harner and Ralph Metzner, and they were all on my dissertation committee. And it was just a magical time for me. And I really delved into shamanism at that point and actually decided to do my doctoral dissertation about the interface between shamanic practices and Western counseling. And anyway, that's a really quick summary of that process. And around that time, I began an apprenticeship with my wife and I both. Lena, we started an apprenticeship with a Maracame that you mentioned. His name was Guadalupe, and he was from the Wixárika tribe, which are also known as Huichol people, but they prefer the name Wixárika. And that lasted 10 years. And during that time, he asked us not to share our training with anyone. So we couldn't talk to anyone about the fact that we were, in an apprenticeship with him for 10 years. And then he passed on at that point. And he said that he would always stay with us and help us in all the various ways that we would need to carry on the teachings. And that's been the case. He's always been around. I always feel him around. Anyway, that's in a nutshell. And then the rest is like travel and working with shamans around the world and studying their ways and looking at cross-cultural shamanism and because there's many different practices from different parts of the world, from the Arctic to the Amazon to, very different environments. But our interest has always been in what are the nuggets? What are the things that are like central to all shamanic practice around the world? So you could say our specialty would be in cross-cultural shamanism.
That's great. I want to just, before we move off of that question, I love how many grandmothers play such important roles in our lives and paths. And, they just plant these seeds that end up being so important. The same has been true for both of my grandmothers, even though one of them I didn't even know. She died when my mom was 6 months pregnant with me. And yet she's been a really important person in my life across the veil. And
Yeah.
the grandma I did know was a very, very important person in my life too. I have memories of making rugula with her. She was Jewish. Like you with the candy. I love that. It's just so heartening that those moments end up being some of the seeds that such important things end up growing out of, even if we don't know yet that that's what'll happen.
Yeah, those grandmas are pretty important.
So important, more than we realize. I mean, I feel like it's one of those relationships that for me has continued to grow, even after, which is another thing I love about what you said about how your guide had said he would be there for you, who you were apprenticing with, and Guadalupe, and how you feel him. I love that. We'll talk more about this later in the talk, but the ancestral stuff I think is one of the most powerful components, in my opinion, that we have access to and that we can work with in our lives. So
yeah.
So what is shamanism and how is it related to Western counseling methods?
Okay, well, it's a huge question. I'll try to condense that one too. Shamanism is a cross-cultural practice. It exists all over the world in different continents, everywhere. It's the world's oldest spiritual practice. I don't call it a religion because it doesn't have like a holy book, or it doesn't have a hierarchy. It doesn't have a pope or anything like that. There are individuals that practice it everywhere, but it is spiritual, and but it's also very practical. Shamans were the first medical doctors. They were the ones that could set bones, they could reduce fevers, they could take care of the people's needs, and they passed that information from one to the other through the generations. And the human race wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for shamans, because the shamans were the ones that had that knowledge. And they knew where the herds were. They knew where to send the hunters to find food for the tribe. And they were just central to the survival of the tribes. And often they were the chief of the tribe, so they had leadership positions. So so that's, the practice of shamanism. And there was a second part to that question. What was that?
The second part was how it relates to Western counseling methods.
Okay, so in addition to being medical people, they were the world's first psychologists. They treated people that were mentally ill or having extreme, had trauma, those kinds of things. That was a specialty of theirs. And so it made sense to look at their practices and their way of looking at the world, because that's what we as therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, that's what we do. But we look at it from a very Western point of view. And it seemed to me valuable to look at how they could come together like that. So I could get into my research and all that, but I actually don't want to, because it takes a lot of time. But there's let's just say there's aspects of the way shamans see the world that I think are really, really important for Western psychology to move toward. For example, Western psychology prides itself on being very not spiritual, but I don't see how that's possible. Reality just is spiritual. So how can you not take that into consideration? That there are powers, and shamanism is all about power, about gathering power, about absorbing power, about storing power, about using power well for the service of other people. And that power is sourced in what they call the spirit world. It's sourced in what scientists today would probably call the quantum field. And that's an extremely important notion. And so if, Western psychologists don't have a concept of that, they're really not operating from a place of power. That's critical. So I don't know. That's what I can say about it in a short time. That's such an important point. I can talk about it all day, but let's leave it there.
You are so speaking my language, so I could take you on. We could have many, many more questions about that. On my end as well, because this is really the reason for the conference. Honestly, is that I think that there is so much. I presented at ASEP. Do you know ASEP, the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology? So I presented there in 2022 about using psychological astrology to cultivate more compassion, self-compassion, and compassion for other people. And I went off on a tangent in that presentation that was really important to me, and it relates to what you're talking about when I said that I think Western psychology and Western methods, I see it. I'm Jungian, so I see that lack of balance, where we're disavowing huge aspects of what is a part of us. Things like astrology, for instance, things like shamanism, things like intuition, and ways of knowing things that you can't study with your causal methods and looking in laboratory research in the ways that scientists are used to doing. There's this whole other side, but that doesn't. So even if we can't approach it in the ways that we would approach what's on this other side, we don't need to disavow it. We need to bring it in. But again, this is where we could go off for so long on this, because I think, the way therapists say that the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And I think in Western, we think we know, and there's so much we don't know. And instead of trying to get to know what we don't know and come to interact with it in ways that may look different, but that are just as valid in terms of how we come to know things, if we can't do that, we are perpetually out of balance.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
So, yeah. Okay, so what do you mean by the medicine something?
Okay, so I think the best way to start with answering this question is to look at the root words. So, for example, the Latin is let me look here. It's medior. the Latin root of the word medicine, medior, and it means to heal. But then there's also a Sanskrit word that is pronounced medos. And no, the Sanskrit word, I'm sorry, is medha, meda. And meda means intelligence, knowing. And then the Greek word is medo, and that means to give advice. So there's all these roots of the word medicine that actually bring together all the aspects, which is that there's supreme intelligence involved. It means that there's healing involved. And it means that there's like an advisory capacity. There's like helping people through communication or consulting or that sort of thing. And so then, so everything has that capacity. If everything is medicine, then the trees have supreme intelligence, and they also have a healing quality, and they can advise us if we just knew how to listen. And that would be true if I talked about animals or the elements or the clouds or the rain or, whatever we talked about, it would have those same three components that if we knew how to listen, that it would be much, much, very profoundly helpful for us. And shamanism is based on that. It's all about learning how to listen, learning how to communicate with the natural environment, which we've forgotten how to do in our culture. So so when I talk about medicine, and many people do, many indigenous people talk about things as medicine. They talk about the sun as a medicine. They might even prescribe that. You need to go sit in the sun for a while. You need to go in the moonlight and let the moonlight shine on. You need to sit under the stars. You need to go to the forest. You need to go to the meadow, because environments also have these qualities of medicine. So for example, just to give some examples, mountains are for inspiration, whereas a meadow is for joy, and the forest is for mystery, but the desert is for clarity. So you can actually go to these different environments and be healed by that, depending on what you need, what kind of medicine is best for you at that time. So really, when it comes down to, when you start to think about, music and philosophy and astrology and more material things that like plants and animals, and we could go on and on and on. And I can't think of anything that isn't medicine or could be medicine if we just used it in the right way. Yes, you can use medicines in the wrong way. A great example of that would be tobacco. Tobacco is a really powerful medicine for most indigenous people, at least in the Americas. And it's become so in other places too in the world. And yet people misuse it, and of course it kills them. And so that which is a powerful medicine can also sometimes poison you or kill you if you don't use it right. So now we're getting into the nuances of, medicine and medicine work, and how it can either help you or sometimes not so much.
Yeah, great. This leads right into my next question, which is, can a trauma ever be a medicine for someone, or are there some things that are just too poisonous to be medicine?
That's a good point to argue, but it's clear to me that everything's medicine. So, which includes trauma, but it has a lot to do with our perspective. So if I see trauma as being my undoing and very destructive, and maybe I'll never recover from it, then I mitigate. It's like I remove the medicine aspect. I can't see it as medicine, therefore I'm not allowing the medicine of it to help me. But if I see it as medicine, I have to be a little creative with that. I have to say, how is this trauma that I've endured, how is it medicine for me? I have to sit with that and I have to allow it to be made clear to me. Once I can do that, then I can see what the medicine is and how it helps or could help and how I could use it actually. I mean, specifically as a medicine to help me. So I don't think anything, and this goes to a larger philosophy, which is even though sometimes it seems like it, I don't think that we're ever given more than we can handle, which is, more of a spiritual point of view. Some people would say, I don't believe that, but I really do. I think that we get to the limit, we're pushed, and we push ourselves, our higher selves push us to learn. And sometimes that looks pretty hard, pretty difficult, but it's always something that can be managed at some level. So then everything becomes medicine. But it takes a willingness to see it as medicine first. Otherwise, if you don't recognize something as food and you're starving to death, you'll die because you're not going to eat it. But if you see that it's a fruit or a vegetable or something, then you will go and eat it and survive. So it's the same thing.
I love that, especially because there's that saying, and I've said it many times before, but that saying, everything happens for a reason, I think is such a, it can really come off wrong. And I really like this way of thinking about it even more, even though the function may be similar. I think there is something about that way of framing it, that everything is medicine if you can. I mean, it also reminds me of that saying, fate and character are the same, or soul and character are the same. I think these are the places where we have to dig deeper than we even know we have access to in order
Yeah.
to see things as medicine. I happen to agree with you that we not only do I think we only take what we can handle or get what we can handle, but even more, and again, a lot of people might disagree with this, but I believe that we decide what we're gonna work on and work with in our lives. And so these things that come to us, I mean, but it's so hard. And you say things like this is why that saying everything happens for a reason. I mean, when you look at like people who are victims of systemic oppression and racism, and there's so much stuff out there that just I think we have to be careful how we
Yeah.
frame things. But to your point, I mean, everything has, um this is what I hear you saying, at least, and tell me if this is wrong, but that everything has the capacity to act as medicine if we can figure out how to relate to it in a way that we ultimately come to heal some aspect of ourselves that was not healed before we got that medicine.
Yeah. And, to your point, the fact that I think it's very helpful to see everything as medicine, but that doesn't mean that we should tolerate things in the world that have a medicinal aspect to them if we look at them, the right way. But it doesn't mean that, like, oh well, since trauma is medicine, why don't we just all let ourselves have trauma after trauma? That would be ridiculous. That's not what I'm saying at all. Same as I'm not saying, even though the way somebody responds to racism can become a medicine for them. But that doesn't mean we should tolerate racism in the world or anything else that's, similarly potentially damaging.
Yeah, well put. It reminded me when you were talking of what's that agent, epitaph, that makes you throw up. It's like maybe some
Oh,
things are like racism is such a toxic energy that
yeah.
maybe the medicine actually is that it makes us sick, and then we need to throw it up and dilute it with an agent that makes it less toxic.
Well, actually, I think that's exactly what's happening in the world today. And some people are really worried that, like, the world's becoming more racist or more negative in a lot of ways. But I actually think that what we're doing is we're looking at all the most intolerable stuff that we have tolerated for so long, and that we're looking at it and saying, no, no more. So anyway, it's a little
Yeah,
aside.
but a worthy one.
I'm gonna get up for a second and close my door because it blew open because we're having a windy day. My
So
door
funny.
blew open and it's a little noisy. So hold on. Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay. That's a funny synchronicity that the door blew
Yeah.
open while we were talking. Okay, so how can you tell if something is the right medicine for you or if it's not a good medicine for you? And related to this, and I can repeat something if you want me to, but related to this, can something be the right medicine for one person, but the wrong medicine for someone else?
Absolutely. It's just like, think of medical medicines. We have medicines that are good for some people, but like, if you have diabetes, you take insulin, but a person who's not doesn't have it, that's the poison for them. So you have to be paying attention. In general, medicines that are good for you, if we think in terms of the natural environment, like the wind or a stream or a waterfall or, these kinds of things. If it's a good medicine for you, you will be attracted to it. You'll be drawn to it. And if it's not a good medicine for you, you won't be. You'll walk by it, maybe admire it from a distance and walk on. But there'll be nothing to draw you there. So there's a way that the world, we live in a very supportive world. There's so much support. This is a slightly different topic, but I just want to mention it, is that the fact that everything is medicine also suggests that the world itself is extremely supportive of us thriving. It's provided us with so many ways to experience support. And even the fact that we know what's good for us intuitively. And of course, if we shut down our intuition, that's not helpful because then we can't hear or listen or pay attention to or see. But if our intuition is cultivated and we open that up, then we'll know what draws us and perhaps even why. So that would be my simple answer to how can you tell the difference? And of course, if it's really bad for you, you will be repelled by it. Okay, so like I'm really sensitive to poison oak, which grows in California and some places in the West Coast. And I just see the stuff and I'm like out of there. And, for me, the medicine is not going near it. But that's still a medicine.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a, it's so not basic in a way that it's like basic in such a true, like, I think when you think of amoebas, I remember learning about amoebas in life science in the 7th grade, and they even can learn about noxious stimuli and not going
Oh,
toward things that are noxious. So
right. Yeah, that's true. They'll back away from stuff that they don't want to be around. So all medicines are not the same for everyone. In fact, there are plants that animals eat and need for their own health that humans shouldn't eat. And there's food that humans eat that dogs shouldn't eat. It'll make them sick and die, like chocolate. So, yeah, there's certain medicines for certain uh, groups and not for others. And we have to be discerning about that.
I also love in what you said, it reminded me of how when you were talking about how supportive our earth is and the universe is in terms of our healing, I was thinking of our tendency to repeat trauma that we've had. I mean,
Yep.
Freud talked about this, that it's the repetition compulsion, it's our effort to process. And
Yeah.
so it kind of helps. I mean, again, I'm not trying to, you know, minimize if people are having intrusive flashback experiences of trauma. It's not like they are going to have an easy time seeing how that seems like any sort of medicine, but with the right kind of help. And I think this is the kind of thing you hear of in psychedelic journeys. People talk about these are the exact kinds of things that come up. It's our trauma that's actually trying to get resolved. That's
Right.
why it keeps knocking on the door of our psyche, and we're so used to running, you know, for good reason. We're scared, and so much of the time when those things happened in the first place, we did not have the capacity or the resources to be
Right.
present to them at all. But that's the thing that has to happen if we're going to heal, is that we have to actually, if something keeps coming toward us, I think that that's a really optimistic, maybe too strong a word, but it's a way of thinking about it that is calming and comforting.
Yeah. Well, that repetition type quality of certain traumas, you know, you keep banging yourself in the same place. You have a hurt elbow, and for sure you're going to bang it over and over until, you know, it heals. And uh, uh, suppression is not known as an effective treatment for something, you know, for trauma. It doesn't work to suppress it. That's actually what causes the repeat injuries, is like, oh, you didn't get it the first time? Well, here, you know, pay attention to this now. So uh, we know that if we stop and acknowledge the trauma, and of course, the 12-step programs really understand that. They say it has to be acknowledged. Somebody has to see that alcohol is a problem for them, and that it's caused tremendous amounts of trauma in their life, and they need to like make amends and look at that and all that. That's a very effective approach, because it doesn't try to suppress anything. It says, oh, look at this. Not look at this from a point of view of judgment or criticism or anything like that. It's just acknowledgement. It's just like, oh, this happened. Okay, that's the beginning of healing. And then it's not about overindulging and analyzing it to death. It's often just about acknowledging it and maybe feeling the feelings that were never felt. And so in that respect, that's the shamanic way. The shamanic way doesn't ever talk about suppressing things. It's really all about acknowledging whatever is so.
So again, here we are having this conversation because this is the exact kind of stuff that I would say I figured this. I don't want to say figured it out like I understood everything, but early in my psychology education, I was catching on to the fact that this, you know, the way that we have of we do a lot of the time try to suppress things without even realizing that that's what we're doing. That's not how we're framing it, but that is what I think, you know,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of medicines. And again, I don't want to get in the weeds. I think people have such different
Right.
lives and experiences, and need to, you know, there are people for whom medicines have been, like pharmaceutical medicines have been life-saving. But so I'm not trying to get into a discussion about that, but more about the idea of suppression in general. And I mean, therapies can be very suppressive.
It
I
can
think
be.
cognitive behavioral therapy can be done in a way that's really suppressive. If you're constantly pointing out someone's errors and thinking, how much do you think they're going to want to share with you? I think they feel
Right.
judged. And so anyway, but I do think it is such an important through line of and why shamanism is such a needed balance to the way that we look at things in Western psychology.
Well, you brought up a few minutes ago, you brought up, you know, psychedelic plant medicines. And that's plant medicines are used by shamans all over the world, except in places where there's no plants, which like severe desert or way, way high in the mountains at 18,000 feet. There's no plants. But plant medicines are important because, and especially psychedelic ones, because they seem to have the the quality of releasing the amnesia about trauma. And they make, so sometimes people are scared of those plant medicines because they go, oh, they release too much. They remind me of things I wish I'd forgotten, or, you know, that sort of thing. But that is the healing. They open doors so that one can acknowledge and then take the next step and heal. And that's been a tool of shamanism forever. 70,000 years. We don't know how far it goes back, but in fact, you know, a good example would be Siberian shamans that used Amanita muscaria, which is the mushrooms that grew up there, and they're deadly poison if you eat them directly. And so what they would do would be they would pick those mushrooms and they would give them to the reindeer, and the reindeer could eat them, and then they would pass through the liver of the reindeer, and then the shamans would collect the urine from the reindeer and drink that, and then it would pass through their liver, and then they would give it to the people or the patient. Now it's been processed through two livers, and it wouldn't be harmful anymore, and it would only have its positive medicinal qualities. These things they figured out. How did they figure that out? I mean, you know, that's not intuitive, but they knew this stuff. They were tuned in to the natural environment and the plants. And just about all the shamans I've talked to that use plant medicines, they say, well, how do we find out about this? The plants told us. You know, we just listened to what they said. Nobody can understand that in the Western world, you know, but they know what they were saying, is that they instruct you. And so out of that has come enormous benefit to so many human beings. And we have a renewed interest in all that today. I think that's a very, very good thing in the big picture and in the long run. I think there's danger of misunderstanding and abuse and divorcing these medicines from their indigenous roots. I think we should listen to indigenous people about these plant medicines and how they should properly be taken, what kind of diet goes with them, what, you know, there's a lot of this is being ignored. I don't like that aspect of it, but I think it's good that there's an interest in them.
I agree. And my experience has been that people are genuinely, at least the people I've come across, I did several mushroom journeys before moving from Colorado. And one of them was so, to your point of exactly what you're talking about, I will never forget this amazing woman. And I, you know, had a blindfold on, and she would come over and I would be talking to her a little bit, and I'd ask her some earnest questions. She'd look at me so seriously and say, ask the mushrooms. And I was like, right. So I'd put my blindfold back on and go back in. And I got some really deep information that day that I remember still very specifically and find very helpful. And I didn't get it. I didn't even get it from me, I wouldn't say.
Yeah.
I think I got it from the mushrooms. And
Right.
yeah, it's I think that level of respect is exactly what's needed. This is not, you know, to be extracted or done with too much, you know, like not enough seriousness. I think these things are serious when they are used in ways that can help us heal. I personally see healing as serious business, even if it doesn't have to be so heavy and horrible. It can have moments of lightness with it for sure. But and love and beauty and all kinds of things. But I do think it's serious, and I do think people are taking this more seriously. At least the ones I'm sure there are plenty of. There's a wide range, I'm sure. But
Well, you know, humor is a great medicine. But even, you know, you can take humor seriously, that it's so important that we ought to do it more.
right.
That's taking medicine, the medicine of humor seriously.
as someone with so much Capricorn energy in my chart, humor has been a incredibly, and music, which you mentioned before, both of those have been deeply, deeply important aspects of my personal medicine my entire life. I mean, I wither in very obvious ways with a lack of either one of those things, I think.
Yeah.
So it's a testament to
Yeah.
how strong medicine they both can be.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit about the ancestors and their medicine and shamanism and how we can work with them, how shamans look at or work with ancestral healing?
Well, that's part of a whole group of helping spirits. There's ancestors, there's allies, there's all kinds of beings that we don't see physically, but help us and have been known to help us historically for tens of thousands of years. And there are even references to them in the great holy books, like the Bible and such. If people knew how to read it, they would understand that, yeah, there's angels and they do come and they help you. We don't have to they don't have any special name. We call them different things. But ancestors they come in several categories. So some of our ancestors are genetic line. So we're connected to our ancestors through the genetics. But some of our ancestors, like maybe somebody married into the family back, but somehow we didn't get their genes. They're still our ancestors, and they're still really can be very helpful because they lived before, they know the terrain of being a human being. They made so many mistakes. They learned so many things by doing it the wrong way and then maybe learning to do it the right way, or maybe it was just a series of huge mistakes. But they're in a position to really help us because they can warn us. They can say, oops, don't make that move. Don't make that choice because I did that and it led me way off the path. So, and I believe we get that kind of support and help all the time. All the time. I do. I may not always be paying attention to it, but it's still coming in. And if I tune in, every day, it's like, oh, thank you for that. So at least I know enough now where I can say thank you, even though I don't always know when it's coming in.
So true. I think this is one of the places that midlife, I think you probably know Carl Jung was all about midlife. And it is such a time of there's such change that, like, for instance, when we were talking about the grandmothers, I think that my grandmother, both my grandmothers sort of re-emerged for me in midlife, I would say.
Yeah.
And I think that access, feeling more connected to, like you're saying, our ancestors, guides, archetypes, all the things that we can access if we're in alignment and paying attention. You say, it's pretty profound how, I mean, I'm not saying I can see spirits. I can't see spirits. I know some people can, but you can feel them at times. I mean, there are undoubted moments of connection and communion and
Yeah.
it's
And these are, I mean, not everybody believes in reincarnation. I do. It's just obvious to me, but many of these ancestors we've known over and over and over again, and will know again in different capacities. And it's an ongoing dynamic relationship. It's not static. It's not something fixed that happened in time. That's a very limited way of looking at time. Everything's happening at once. We're in time, but most of the universe is happening outside of time. And so that makes it like a really like a tapestry that with threads that come from every direction and create a picture. And it's a sum total of all of it. And that's the way I see ancestors and past lives, possibly future lives, genetics. All of those things are playing a part in how we show up in every moment. Right? How you're showing up right now, how I'm showing up, who we are. There's so much involved in that. We're like, it's been said we're standing on the shoulders of giants. And I mean, that's really true. And so tying it back into healing and medicine, all of that's medicine. They're all medicines. And how could we miss that? How could we not know that this universe is designed for us to get maximum help at all times? And most people are strictly looking at how awful it is, or how bad it is, or how it's all going to hell in a handbasket. I mean, especially during these times, it's kind of rough. But the opposite is true. The opposite is true. It's just incredibly supportive. There's our true work, our true rest, our true play, our true study. All those things are medicines. All we have to do is just open to them, take care of ourselves. There's the three, what I call the three building blocks of the universe is supreme intelligence, love, which is magnetism, and energy, which makes things happen. So you have the intelligence, you have the magnetism that brings everything together, and then you have energy to make it move. That's what you need for a universe. Those are three medicines. Every medicine we could talk about has aspects of those three things. Anyway, this gets pretty esoteric, but I really do want to point to that this game is designed to win. It couldn't be any other way. And I have no concern whatsoever that the human race is going to destroy itself. I don't believe that at all. I think we go through hard times. We like our dramas. We like our Hollywood movies where all is lost moments happen and you think it's all going to go to hell. And then somehow they pull themselves out of it. And that makes for a good movie, right? This is a good movie. Well, sometimes it's a little scary, but.
That's so great. It's just no wonder I have been drawn to things like shamanism. It's such it just seems so much more balanced and true in a very, it's not high in the sky. It's not saying that it's going to be easy and that, it's just all a walk in the park. You just have to turn away from the bad things and turn toward the good things. The things that are tough are medicinal if they're medicinal, and we will transform through having interactions with them and really being present to the teaching and being humbled to transform as a result of having those experiences. But it's like you're talking about the deep truth of that, but you're also making it much more like there's a path through.
There's a path for everyone. And if you don't get it right this time, you get it right sometime. So it's designed for everyone to come out in the end in the perfect place that they need to be, however long time it takes. And medicines, as we know from conventional medicines often don't taste good. They're sometimes a little hard to take. You grimace and it's bitter or it's sour or something like that. And some of our medicines are like that. But some of our medicines really do feel good, like laughter and music. And, those would be like the sweet medicines that they taste good. We need both. I think we need some medicines that challenge us. And we need some medicines that taste really good and remind us that, like, oh, that's life can be really good. And there's a place for both.
Reminds me of trines and squares in astrology, that everything is,
Yes.
we're made up of both kinds of energy. All of our important relationships have both kinds of energy. It's because they're both so needed in different ways. We would not be the same without, we'd be totally out of balance if we only had ease or if we only had challenge. It's that weaving together of the path through in the best, highest possible way we can. That is the journey and the work.
Yeah, that's the journey. And that's very Jungian and
Right,
shamanic.
right, right, exactly.
There's a journey involved, so here we are.
Yep. Well, I have just one more question for you. I could ask you 10 more and still have more in the hopper, but just have one more that I'll ask right now, which is, what is the most powerful medicine in the world?
Well, two things come to mind, actually. I think the most powerful medicine in the world is love. And because it's magnetic, it brings everything together. It's the source of everything, relationships, communication, you name it, so there's that. Well, I don't think anything competes with it, really. That's the most powerful medicine. But if we looked at maybe things that are medicines, I would have to say tobacco. Tobacco is certainly the most powerful plant in the world. This peyote medicine man was asked by one of his students, what is the most powerful plant in the world? And of course, the student expected him to say peyote, but he didn't. He said tobacco. And the student said, well, why is that? He said, oh, tobacco's killed more people than any other plant. Which is a little weird way of looking at it, but yeah, peyote hasn't really killed people. He was acknowledging that real power often comes with a kind of poison. So poisonous things are some of the most powerful things in the world. So you have to know, like Amanita muscaria, it's a deadly poison. So you have to figure out, how am I going to find the medicine here? So same with tobacco. If you're abusing tobacco and you're treating it disrespectfully and you're just using it for your own gratification, it'll hurt you. There's no question. Tobacco hurts you. But if you use it for prayers, or you use it for protection, or you use it for one of the many things that it's good for, then it's an incredibly powerful medicine. You can blow some tobacco smoke from wherever you're sitting with a prayer, and that prayer could change the world, because that smoke is going to go everywhere eventually. And shamans know that. So they'll often pray with tobacco, but then they'll turn right around and say, but don't just go and smoke tobacco, because that'll hurt you. So they make a distinction, it's a medicine, yes, but show respect. And it's a good thing. And that's a little bit of a problem we have in our culture right now, and that we don't understand that. So we're very critical of tobacco, and I understand why, but we need to know that it's also ceremonial, and that it's very, very powerful and helpful plant as well.
Reminds me of what we were talking about before with psychedelics too. I mean, to me,
Yeah.
it falls under, I think, cultural humility,
Yeah.
right? Learning stuff like this is part of that cultural humility that we need to cultivate here in the West, to
Right.
understand things are not what we decide to say they are. They have
Right.
histories way outside of our Western minds that we would be smart to learn about, or we think we know.
Yeah, right. There's so much to learn always.
Yes. Um, Reminds me of that's another midlife thing. That's when you sort of figure out how much you don't know, right? Like you spend the first half of your life thinking you know so much and you're amassing all this knowledge. And if you're smart, when you hit midlife, you realize, oh wow, not only have I not amassed all this knowledge I thought I amassed, but in a lot of ways I feel like I don't really necessarily know very much at all.
Yeah, which paves the way for you to actually make new decisions and new choices that could lead you into having a better second life than your first life in this body, is the
Exactly.
way I put it.
I'm on number 3 right now. I feel like I'm starting
Ah,
life number 3, where law
yeah.
school was my first, and
Oh,
the last
right.
20 years of psychology practice and private practice has been, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily, because I feel like I started on this new chapter before now. I feel like it's
Yeah,
now getting underway, but that I feel like I'm in Act 3. And it really, to your point, it has come from listening and
right,
humility, and not the kinds of things that we're taught in the first half of life will get us everywhere. It's the
right.
exact opposite, actually. Those are the things that'll get us into a lot of trouble if we don't balance them with some humility and inner listening.
Yeah, we're kind of taught to know what we're doing at all times, to control our lives. And then we find out that's not it. That doesn't help. It's actually not knowing what we're doing that is the most leads to the most discovery. The Buddhists are right about that. It's like keep don't know mind. We don't know.
Yep.
Like maybe we should listen more.
Yeah, could not be more true. And again, this conference is born out of these exact kinds of ideas. So see why I was so excited to have you on here, Jose. You fit perfectly. Perfectly. So you're talking about tobacco before was a good segue into your free gift for our participants. Um, so this is a tobacco clearing. There will be, I'll say the link and how to find it, but also it will be on the video and there will be a link below.
Yeah.
So it's a tobacco clearing and protection guided audio with Lena, Jose's wife, Lena Stevens. Um, Tobacco, a powerful medicine, may very well be the strongest clearing plant in the world. And when it is used properly, as it is in this brief ceremony, it can work wonders for you. Enjoy. So you can find it at thepowerpath.com, no spaces, /product/tobacco clearing protection slash. And then you'll use, oh, hi, pup. You'll use the coupon code HEALING at checkout, all capital letters. So when you go to the site for the tobacco clearing, I would encourage you also to sign up for PowerPath newsletters and forecasts. I personally have been using them and reading them and really working deeply with them, I would say, for 10 to 12 years now. And Lena, who writes the forecast, is so deeply wise. It definitely feels like she channels the information. And so besides getting the really helpful, it's, she takes astrological things into consideration. So it's very timely with the cosmic forces. But besides that, it is just deep wisdom to live by. So if you just look at she breaks it down into these beautiful chunks of different aspects of the month and then into the weeks of the month. And I try and look at them in the mornings every day, just the weekly description, but there's such deep wisdom in her words about just things to pay attention to. I just always find myself richer and having benefited so much from having access to that incredible information. So, and it's free. It's all free. The forecasts are free. So for people to sign up on your list, I mean, that is just such a wealth of amazing. I mean, it's another gift. Let's put it that way. So I just wanted to make a plug for it because been so rich in my life. Thanks. Okay, so Jose, is there anything else that you want to share before we wrap up?
If I start anything now, it'll be a whole conversation. So I better not. But I'll just say that I've enjoyed this immensely. I've enjoyed talking to you and being interviewed by you, but I also enjoy the fact that there's all these people that are listening. And I certainly hope that something has been sparked, or, you know, there's been some ahas, and I'm so grateful for that. So thank you for listening, whoever's out there.
I agree. That is such a beautiful thing to put out. And I also have enjoyed it immensely, and am so grateful that you're here providing such wisdom that you have been amassing for so long. And I mean, we need it so desperately. Your words are such medicine for us. And I'm immensely, immensely grateful to have been able to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you so much.
So thank you again to Dr. Jose Luis Stevens for this interview. And thank you to all of you who are watching and participating in the Boundless Psyche Timeless Soul Summit. Take care, everyone.